Sounds more than a food choice, but.
There's like a little way that the boats go in and out.
Yeah, that's what I said.
That's gonna be
You're
good, the
supposed to
way
tell
the
me.
boat- I will tell you.
Well, I don't think she's gonna be worried about that right now.
That's a good point.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the October 24th, 2018 Abington Finance Committee meeting. We have what is a relatively light agenda for the night tonight. We have our esteemed town manager, Rick LaFond, here to join us. Most of the agenda is you telling us stuff. So, come forward.
Good thing.
I don't know if I already said it, but the Red Sox.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Red Sox are on?
1 hour.
Right now?
from
8:09.
No.
You're kidding, right?
I didn't know, I didn't know if they were already on or not.
If you ask who's playing,
I know it's the Red Sox.
I'm sorry. Would you like me to start on the
Sure thing.
discussion
So, discussion items, we have the status of the budget and revenue for the current fiscal year.
items? Yes, well, other than our waste collection, we are trending right on. I mean, obviously, there's some seasonal bumps, you know, there's some procurement early in the year, which obviously might skew what you might see on a report. And speaking of that, I think probably through the chairman, we can probably, in the next day or so, get you the first quarterly expenditures to budget report. And again, like I said,
That would be great.
it's only of so much value this early in the fiscal year, but at least something that you can get familiar with, so those of you who haven't seen it before. So like I said, other than the trash collection, and maybe it's best to combine these a little bit, especially for the new people, after last year's town meeting was over, we were informed, we have a 3-year contract with our vendor, Republic Services, and with the option for a 2-year extension. We were informed that the option to extend was up to both the town and the vendor. So what we agreed is not to do a 2-year extension, but to do 2 1-year extensions. And the surprise came at the end of the year when, there used to be a market for recyclables, there isn't anymore. And if I get into the issues with China again, everyone's gotta go home and go to sleep, so.
We've had a
Yeah, you got
thorough discussion on
Yes,
that.
that's right, so they still get made fun of. So there's no market for recyclables, so what we used to get at least a zero-based, I guess we call it profit margin, but we used to get paid for recycling. Now it's actually right now costing the exact same amount to get rid of a ton of garbage. So rather than paying 0 per ton, we're paying about $87 per ton. That has held for the first 3 months of the fiscal year. That's a direct pass-through from the vendor.
What are we paying per ton for the trash?
It's just
The
it's
same,
the same thing at the moment.
87.
Yeah, and that's contractual. The recycling is a direct pass-through. So if recycling disposal costs go down, then hopefully we save a little bit money over what we're projecting to be our deficit. And like I said, this was an end of the fiscal year issue, so we didn't have a chance to plan for it in the budget process. So what we're looking at is something in the $225,000 range as an over expenditure, assuming that these the per ton still
I'm
holds.
sorry, Rick, what was that amount?
Approximately $225,000. That's our estimate. So
Just for
just for the
the current year that we're in?
exactly. So we'll have to have an end of year transfer. We also have to think about how to build the FY20 budget with these costs.
So that 225 over,
That's the projection.
and
Current projection.
so if we go looking back on this year, when did that start to, on this last fiscal year? So we start in July.
July 1, yes.
July 1, it wasn't 87 and 87
That's
per
when
ton.
this is when the contract extension became effective, was July 1.
So
What
this-
I'm asking though is
Yeah.
the price per ton for recycle increased when? It wasn't July.
It was July 1, yes, the beginning of this fiscal year.
We were paying 87,
Yes, prior to that, we weren't paying anything per ton for disposal. That is, the contract was the contract, so the vendor had to.
okay, so it probably increased in the previous contract, but because we had a contract with them.
Exactly.
So then when we start the 1-year extension, it bumped up to 87.
And the reality here is that, as I said, the option to extend was at had to be invoked by the town and Republic. So it wasn't a unilateral decision, and quite frankly, the Republic simply wasn't gonna renew. They were gonna continue to take a bath on getting rid of recycling.
But so we should expect somewhere around a $225,000 increase for next year's trash budget.
That is
Just
correct.
because the number was higher, well, or the fear was that it was higher, or that it would be higher.
Correct, yeah. Hopefully, the per ton cost at the moment won't go higher. If anything, we hope it will go down, but again, it really depends upon the markets. And like I said, this is a direct pass-through cost. So you get the tonnage by the rate, it's not rocket science at this stage, but like I said before, instead of having just a 2-year extension, which is what the contract provided for us to do, we did break it up into 2 1-year contracts. And that will allow us, as we're starting to do, is to take a look at other vendors too. Unfortunately, it's not likely to make any huge difference because that's a service that's subject to prevailing wages. So regardless of what vendor you're using, they have to pay their staff, their workforce, the same amount of money or no less than prevailing wages. So if your labor costs are going to be basically the same with any vendor, and your per ton and disposal and recycling, because no vendor is going to throw in recycling for yeah. So it's unlikely that there's going to be another vendor who's going to be able to significantly change the financial dynamics. So.
Mike, 2 questions. Are we locked in for the remainder of this contract at $87 a ton, or can that change at any time, or is there a certain, like, quarterly?
On a per month basis, there is a cost per ton every month. And again, that's a direct pass-through. So that could change every single month, depending on how much it costs Republic to dispose of it, or find a place, yeah.
So
whether-
for waste, it remains 87.
Correct. That's
Spread through.
yes.
For
Recycling.
recycling,
is
it changes
subject-
each month.
Correct. Now, again, the per ton cost has held. Obviously, we're hoping that goes down on a monthly basis, but that is subject to fluctuation on a monthly basis.
So there was no way to lock in. They were just like, nope.
No way to lock in, no. So again, and this is typical. This is, municipality-wide at this point. Unless you had a contract that may be expiring, at a different time frame. But the dynamics of that could be interesting too, because how long is a vendor gonna take a bath?
Yeah.
There's got to be some fine print somewhere that they can.
Well, again, they can
back out of
default
that.
on the contract, and what's a municipality's option?
Yeah.
So I guess the biggest question, I think I asked you last time, is what is the purpose to continue to do this if we pay the exact same price? I mean, there's gonna have to be a difference somewhere. If recycling is $100, right, and trash is 87 because of whatever.
Right now, they're both 87.
Right, but again, that makes no sense to me because one's trash and the other one gets recycled, so I don't even know how it could be, but forget it, I'm not in that business. So why wouldn't we just do trash?
Because it's actually, you need a waiver from the state to stop recycling. And that's not going to happen, because there's a presumption that we spent 20 years trying to separate the waste stream.
Yeah,
And there is also a presumption that there'll be some disposal or marketing mechanism within the next couple of years. Now you're gonna have to teach the world to recycle again. And again, you need a waiver from the state to not separate your recycling from.
And the state has no help. The state has no, they just say you have to recycle, no help.
Because
Financial.
environmentally, you
Yeah,
gotta
it's a
think
list of
too,
unfunded
environmentally,
needs.
it's,
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't,
And it's not the state that has to pay the costs, so.
exactly, but my point is, if they're telling you to do something, why they're not subsidizing it, I guess I don't understand.
Just
Unfunded mandate.
to give you a backstory that I've learned at the time I've been on this committee, there are a lot of things that the state tells municipalities that they have to do and does not fund.
Right.
So there are some things they do fund, there are some things they used to fund.
sometimes they start off funding at one percentage, and then as the years go on, the funding,
Yeah.
when there's cuts made to the budget at the state level or at the federal level, it gets passed down to
And
us.
there are things that over time the town has decided to stop doing because the state funding has gone away.
Right.
And there are things that town meeting has voted to stop funding because of that. But in general, most of the things that the state pushes, the state mandates,
So this couldn't go in front of town meeting?
There is very little that the state that the state is required to do to back up their end of
So no, we can't put it in front of town meeting to start recycling.
That's
it.
what I mean.
We could, as a town, apply for a waiver with no guarantee that we're going to get it.
Correct.
And from what I understand, from what I've heard, there are municipalities that have applied for waivers, and I don't believe any have been granted to this point.
And there's also the other issue of, well, what happens to what is now recycling? It goes in the regular waste stream.
Yeah.
So how much you saving? Now you're just paying their $87 a ton
The
here.
same amount of money,
paying over
yeah.
here. And if you require separation of recycling now, well, how does a resident dispose of it? So the logistics of it are tough too, you know?
It also sets us up
Oh,
for
thanks.
not being eligible for certain grants and everything else.
And I
And
don't,
especially where costs are the same currently. If they're the same or less, there's no.
I agree, and
there's
that's my
no-
point.
there's no
My whole point is based upon that. If it gets higher,
If it gets higher, it may be something that we need
Yeah,
to
I got you.
revisit.
Yeah.
but the
that's probably why they're pegging it at 87. Because if they go higher, people are going to start to think about making a decision.
well, once again, the decision is not in the hands of each individual municipality.
Well, can't they all apply for a waiver?
Yeah, but again, the likelihood of getting one is,
And
because again, you still have the issue on not just a statewide basis, is what do you do with both solid waste disposal, you know, there's only so many landfills, there's only so much that can be incinerated if you have approval to do that. There's virtually no place to put it now, so to start.
yeah, putting your
pulling
recycle
your
in
waste-
with the,
You know,
then we're
because
gonna
again-
run out of space for that, and then that's gonna be more expensive. You're
And
gonna pay the
presumably-
expense somewhere.
And presumably, there will come a time, hopefully sooner rather than later, will there once again be markets for recycling. And like I said, it took, you know, if people still aren't necessarily,
Well, I see my neighbor, half my neighbors don't even put out the yellow one.
well, you know,
That's
They're
why
gonna
I'm
love you.
fair enough, fair enough. But as I was saying, I remember back, almost 30 years ago, trying to get people to separate the waste stream. It's taken a long time to get people to learn
Sure.
to separate the
Didn't we
waste stream.
originally say they wouldn't pick up the trash if you didn't have your recycle out?
Yes.
I
They
actually,
wouldn't pick up
they
the
have,
trash.
if you don't
Yeah.
put a recycling to match the trash, they will not pick up the trash.
So the learned behavior over literally decades, for that to cease, and, how long is it gonna take to get people back in the habit of recycling? Those that do, but the vast majority of people do, either because it's forced, or for altruistic reasons,
Or for the
so.
benefit of the town, when we were getting paid for the recycling.
Exactly,
Instead of paying.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
this
that
is-
I can see.
This is a new world right now, this is a new world, and
Yeah.
like I said, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts isn't gonna allow people to stop separating their waste stream, because this is, hopefully a temporary basis, hopefully.
So, outside of that, budget and revenue are tracking.
Yes, we're tracking well. Last year, we closed FY '18 with approximately $250,000 excess in anticipated revenue. And our estimates for the current fiscal year were built on that, so we have every reason to believe that our revenue estimates for the current fiscal year are solid, we'll put it that way, so. And like I said, last year, the net between estimated revenue and expenditures was approximately $1 million. So again, our revenue, considering the challenges we have as a town like Abington, we've been able to maintain, we're not stretching our revenues more than is responsible, even though it's tempting. And skipping to the next piece real quick though, the free cash certification, again, that contains, this information with regard to closing out FY '18. So obviously we feel good about that. The free cash, and I don't want to jump ahead, I don't know if you have further questions about that, but ultimately they all end up being related, but, what's free cash? It's not free and it's not cash. A free cash certification at the end of every fiscal year, the town submits to the Department of Revenue, basically your balance sheet, which outlines a lot of different factors, and a lot of it's accountant speak. And, what your closing balances for the prior fiscal year, you got revenues versus expenditures, any funds that are still on the books from prior fiscal years, articles that don't expire until they're spent, snow and ice removal, basically that balance sheet is sent to the state, and we get a free cash certification, which basically certifies that this is our excess funds that we have, and those can be spent in a subsequent fiscal year. But keeping in mind, it's only one-time money, so you don't want to be spending that on recurring expenses, like budgetary expenses. This coming year, we're going to obviously need that to balance our budget deficits. But we've historically used that for both to build our savings stabilization account and for our capital needs. So that free cash certification is going to be sent probably next Tuesday to the Department of Revenue. A little bit behind last year's schedule. We have a new Department of Revenue rep this year. And within 7 to 10 days, and we hope it's 5 days, the Department of Revenue will certify our free cash, which again is kind of undesignated fund balance is another term for that. And we have every reason, last year we had about 1.3 million in free cash, and there's every reason to believe, I guess, hate to say things in advance, people start spending money before you even get certified. It should be at least as healthy as last year, but the amount that's going to be certified, the Department of Revenue, they have their own way of looking at things sometimes. So, but it should be reasonably close to what the town accountant submits next week. And again, we'll be happy to.
We'll get an update on that next week.
Yeah, I think that's again, you know how it is. Just people start spending money before you actually have it.
Well, I think we've spent the money before we actually have it. Actually,
don't you think? I know what I want to spend the money before. So it's human nature. Let's face it. The town has a lot of needs. So that's essentially, again, I'll get through the chairman and through Deb a copy of our end of the first quarter through expenditure report. Like I say, there's not much to see here, but at least you can have a copy of it. Like I said, some of the expenditures are seasonal, front end of the fiscal year. Summer can be more, in some areas can cost more in some areas. And for instance, during the winter, you're spending a lot of money on road and sand and snow and ice removal supplies that you're not going to get obviously in May or June, which I don't want to jinx us. But
goodness,
historically, that's the way it works.
Let's go with June, July,
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Seasons are changing on us, but so like I said, some budgets are front heavy, some are a little more back heavy. So just as an example. So
Draft budget status.
Yes, yes, the draft budget
Kind of
status.
crazy that we are talking about the FY20.
I know, talking about
draft
closing out
budget.
18.
I was going through putting
Yeah.
the year's numbers on there, and I was shaking my
Yeah,
head.
you have, I mean, you really have 3 fiscal years going at a time. You're closing out 18, which is gonna, again, contribute to free cash certification. You know, you've got the current fiscal year, now we're planning next fiscal year. We're only a quarter of the way through this one. So, yeah, it never stops, does it? So, I know I had provided a memo to the finance committee, it was 1 meeting ago, 2 meetings ago, but as it stands, our departmental budgets are due October 22nd, and that's internally.
So that was Monday.
Actually, they can start being submitted on, and we expect them to be into the town accountant, November 9th, no later than November 9th. But the system, the town's financial management software system, is such that it's set up now that department heads can submit on and after October 22nd. It was about a week behind what we had initially anticipated, but it's not going to change our internal compilation of. In fact, this was my internal document, but I should probably send this out to the finance committee too. In fact, I don't know, did the town accountant maybe send one to you, Madam Chair? Okay, I wasn't sure.
Nope.
So we obviously have our internal budget meetings, and those are to be conducted. Right now, we've got the 20th and 21st, where we clear out our schedule to meet with every department and discuss their budget request. And fortunately or unfortunately, town manager must submit a draft budget to the Board of Selectmen by mid-December, and to the Finance Committee on or by January 15th. Obviously, we provide at the same time. There's no reason to submit 2 documents to do two different bodies. And obviously, it's more applicable to the Finance Committee anyway. So now, keeping in mind, that's the draft budget, which is going to change over time. We won't get our state aid. We can only estimate that until the state's done with its budget process, which is frustrating for communities like us that depend on a significant portion of our revenue stream in state aid. So I caution that. I do this
Yeah,
every
we've
year. Been doing this
Gone
for
over with our newer members.
25 years I've been
Last
doing
meeting,
this.
that
Right.
is, that budget that we get is the starting.
right. Hopefully, it's 90% of the way.
There are times where it's been significantly out of.
Yes.
How's it look for kindergarten? That whole kindergarten, do the full day kindergarten, get money back? No clue?
That's a school.
You'll know, with, like, any of the school committee meetings, they might have updates on the,
Oh, so they do that stuff? I thought that would go to.
No, that's all.
Well, eventually, we'll find out.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
Yeah, I just-
But at this state, I don't have that information. So that being said, I know that, we're certainly prepared to help set up or to schedule, the various departments to meet with the finance committee once you have your schedule set.
I
Make
think
it
at
easier.
least at this point, we're still looking like the schedule that we've been doing the last few years, starting maybe late January, beginning of February with those meetings, and then moving from there is probably it's what we're looking at least at this point, so.
And as was stated, the first draft is usually a little bit out of balance because, again, we don't have our state aid yet, so we have to kind of very conservative build off the existing. We're usually conservative with our other revenue estimates, so the first draft of the budget is usually as bad as it's going to look. I mean, it might be, a couple or a few $100,000 out of balance, which seems like a lot, but it's really not that much in a $51 million budget. So that's what you can expect.
We do everything on $50 million?
51.
Wow.
Yeah. And, so, and once you start to eliminate all your fixed costs, 51 million doesn't look like a whole lot of money
It's not, a lot-
anymore.
it's
No,
not,
it's
it's not a lot of money at all.
No, so,
When does the state get back to you for the,
well, it's usually not until spring,
May,
end of,
Wow.
yes, yeah. 'cause
Usually close to when we're going to town meeting.
Hopefully, the state,
so you kind of scramble to incorporate that?
well, you know, obviously, we hope our early estimates are reasonably close. But the state budget process is such that, you know, we're lucky if they finish their budget process in the spring. Usually it's after our town meeting, but almost every year, if not every year, the Senate and the House, governor come to some agreement on what the local aid package will be. So by the time, you know, we go to town meeting, we know what it's going to be. The problem is, we don't have a lot of time to plan for that revenue before
Yeah.
town meeting. That's the problem. So,
the bigger problem is that our town and the towns like us are, that we're so dependent on
yes.
that money,
Yes.
that it makes it really hard.
How much do you usually get out of the 51? How much? Just give me a rough of the last 5 years, 3 years.
Let me email it to you. I don't want to give you bad information.
But even just,
There's different ways to look at what state aid is. There's so many different
Yeah.
state aid categories.
yeah,
So I'd be more comfortable not saying something.
yeah,
I'm happy to get you that information tomorrow by email, because, you know, so many different categories of state aid.
sure.
And different people look at those differently, so I would rather give you a breakdown, you know, I'll email you out a breakdown of exactly what
Thank you.
it is.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Any other questions for
You're
Rick?
gonna remind me to do that yet?
Is there, oh, go ahead, Mike. Sorry.
No, ask your question, because I gotta.
Is there any other things that we could be taking advantage of that we just don't? Or are we pretty much at the max of, and again, that might be a stupid question, but is there something that is just like we don't have time to get to, or we're not big enough, or we don't have enough I don't know,
No, you're
something?
talking in terms of revenue?
Yeah, like to get more from them.
No, they're all formula based.
Yeah.
They're all formula based. And
Departments heads are usually, our departments are very good about,
oh, well, in terms
grant
of-
writing, and, you know,
Yes.
trying to
Yeah,
receive any
sure.
kind of, anything that they can get. Fire department got,
they got a
different,
nice grant, $75,000 grant, and police, we just had a nice earmark for the police department to replace some of their capital equipment, but no, the major categories of state aid, you know, chapter 70, which is school aid, that's formula driven, based upon population and other financial factors in town, where it's a completely outdated formula.
Yeah,
However, until the legislature decides they want to change that formula, and of course,
formula we have.
that's right, and as you
which
can
that's been going
imagine,
on for many, many years,
different
the
towns with
argument over
different
that.
dynamics are always seeking to have the formula amended that most helps particular communities. So that's one of the reasons the formula hasn't changed. And-
That's what I was gonna say, it must work for somebody.
Mm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, there's no question that it's geared towards communities, you know, predominantly cities that on a, you know, equalized valuation per capita have, at least as far as the state formula goes, have less capacity to spend per pupil.
so bigger.
Not necessarily, so, or
Less
like,
wealthy.
yeah.
That's what,
But
that's,
so the
Yep.
wealthier towns can afford it themselves.
right.
Yeah.
The poorer towns get more assistance. We're so middle of the road
Yeah,
that,
sure.
And, yeah, so, and, you know, and unrestricted local government aid, again, it's all formula driven. It's all formula driven. So when the formulas change, there are winners and losers, and that's why a lot of these formulas have been in place so long. It's the politics of it. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but it's, the competing interests around the state are significant.
So, this is kind of like an off subject, and I will be quick and agile in as much as I can be on this. So,
Cat-like.
it's about the Glenowitz Way project. I was watching the Board of Selectmen meeting from the last one, and I don't know, I will encapsulate it as quickly as I can. We had voted for 50,000 as an estimate to have the facilities on Glenowitz Way buried, and come to find out that that number from National Grid was nowhere near what the total cost was going to be, and now the total cost is at least $500K.
Looking at $500,000.
Yeah.
The 30-second overview for the rest of the committee, or a specific question you want to ask first?
It's
I went to the school
kinda-
meeting, by the way.
well,
a week
this is
ago. Or 2
this
weeks ago.
might tie into that. I guess my uneasiness, and I listened to everything that you said at that meeting, and I agree with what you're saying. My uneasiness is using the contingency money from the school building committee to cover the cost of it. And I understand that, you know, whether we get a bond for it or whether we use that contingency money, we're still paying for it the same way. I guess my uneasiness is that this is definitely an aesthetic for Glenowitz Way, and it would be a positive service effect in the sense of like burying the facilities, burying the cables. Trust me, I understand all that. I feel like is this, where this project has gone from what was said of 50,000 that is now at least $500,000, should we somehow involve the public? I know we wouldn't be able to do it as a warrant and town meeting, or at least an open meeting with the Board of Selectmen and say, this is what happened, this is where we're at, this is our option. We can do it this way from this contingency fund, or we can set it up as a warrant, do it as a capital expense, and get bonded for it. There's an uneasiness of taking it away, not letting the general public of the town know, given a choice where it's not like an emergency, like
Right.
the street is blown up and we need to rebuild the whole
And
street.
there was a time, not that long ago, where the timing of doing this, the goal was to have anything that was going to be done before the final paving of Glenowitz Way. Now, obviously now we're looking at perhaps a multi-year decision project, so ultimately, the work there's no fire drill anymore, so to speak. You know, on the other hand, if the town, or if is going to expend funds from the school building project, you know, that project and the financing of it has to be closed out eventually. You know, this just can't linger for 2 or 3, 4 years, so that's why a decision, you know, hopefully within the next 6 months or so. And what Mike's referring to, what came from the school building committee meeting, this is now, I'm gonna suggest maybe 3 or 4 meetings ago,
Yeah.
was to have a civil engineer, you know, take a look and give us some better information on what the cost would be. Because you're not talking about, you know, you're talking about all the utilities involved here. You're talking about a designed project now. You're not talking about just, you know, cutting a hole in the ground and throwing, you know, one conduit under that street. That's not what this is looking like, despite National Grid's initial estimate. So the building committee's general attitude was, you know, we can underspend the appropriation by whatever the final cost is, 500,000 and change, so that it doesn't have any additional effect on the taxpayers than what they already voted to do. On the other hand, and I know this is the key question, is that it's not within the original scope, and if the building committee's thought process was, if this is what the town wishes to do, and who is the town? Well, through its elected officials. They would want to have input, both the school committee and the Board of Selectmen, vote to support doing that. Essentially, is this enough of a priority? Now, it's the money, but it's also, is this enough of a priority for the town?
And it's the conduit to go to the police station to,
Well, that's
because
there's already that's already been funded in that particular, but the issue is, yeah, is literally burying all the utilities, no poles. And again, yes, it is, to a great extent, it's aesthetics, you know, and on the other hand, spending $97 million on a project like this.
Why is that the issue, though, to bury them? Because you have to?
Essentially aesthetics.
So you
No,
could do
it was
it differently.
Yeah, like, you know, my street is underground, the street next to me
Right.
just has poles. It's basically the exact same thing, it's just
Exactly.
whatever the building at the time, if it's new, you just do that, or they just.
But it's not something that's required. You don't
Well,
have
it's
to
not
bury
required.
it.
No, it's not.
No, and it sounds like, because when I went to the meeting, I asked this, the school committee meeting, and it basically just sounds like it was a mistake, right? So somebody said this is gonna be 50 grand, and it ends up being 600 or 500, whatever. So,
And it will have to be designed, so we're
Yeah.
on the final cost, we're on the cost estimate basis.
my big question is, you just said that they could figure out a way to underspend $500,000 to make this come in. And one, why isn't that person that can figure that out on this finance committee? I said, why isn't the person that can figure out how to do that on the finance committee? If you can underspend by $500,000, but besides that,
Well, because there's a contingency that's built into a project that big, so
Yeah.
if the committee doesn't spend, can work to try not to spend that amount that's within the appropriation,
Right.
that's what we would hope to achieve if this is what the powers that be agree is enough of a priority.
and I don't see it, right? So I drive down the street, so I like to, I mean, again, I'm only in here for a little bit, so I don't see the whole reason to rip up the street again and put these things in. I drive fast, unfortunately. But it's so much money for something that it just sounds like, it's a gold chain, right? Do you want the 18 karat gold chain, or do you just say, hey, I can't afford it right now? I don't know if it's a good decision. I don't know what happened at the meeting you're talking about with the selectmen, but I just don't.
It was
Essentially
more
what
just
I'm
the
telling you now.
information.
Oh, yeah,
Just
okay.
that's all. The selectmen haven't, provided any insight themselves on what they feel is enough of a priority. Again, it's still somewhat fluid.
Yep.
But obviously, it is, it's aesthetics, but it's a legitimate question when you have a $97 million project and you have nice ornamental lighting down Glenwood's Way. And I can't say I notice it either, Greg.
Yeah, no, I know.
Unless you're looking for it, and you have, poles that have been up there for, 50 years, if not longer, and, what do you want the presentation to be when you spend this kind of money on replacing high school, middle school? So again, there isn't the right answer to that.
Yep.
There isn't.
It's
Do
not
we have a,
Two quick
Yeah.
points to Greg. One, the underspending of the project is because the overall building of the school has come in significantly
There was
below
some,
budget.
yeah.
That's why we have that leeway
And what was it, 100 again?
to,
It was a $97 million project.
And where are we at? Do we have any clue?
we
Oh,
are
yeah,
in the 90s.
Yes,
Mid-90s, I would
that's
say.
correct, yeah. It's getting
So I don't know the
getting
exact
close.
number,
It's
but
getting
it's-
close.
but it's close and also close to done.
Mhm.
So they've done a good job of coming in under budget.
Yeah.
So the question, and one of the things that we as a committee have tried to impress through our liaison on that committee is we don't need to spend all of what was
There's no, yeah.
estimated and what was appropriate.
because what was our portion?
Well, the state is about 67%.
60.
Fluid
Yeah.
as to exactly how much.
Well,
but
The grant
some
covered
things were
50,
appropriate,
52%.
Some-
eligible and some things
Right,
weren't eligible.
exactly. Now, for instance, if this particular piece is spent, and there's actually two factors here, and I think part of what Mike was saying, getting at, if this particular project of underground utilities is not something that would be reimbursable under the state formula. So, on the other hand, there's already an appropriation in place, and, it's broadly within, the scope, but it's not specifically in the scope. So it would be allowed to actually do that within the scope of what's already been appropriated, the 97 million. On the other hand, if the town didn't want to do it in that fashion, that's a debt exclusion. So it's paid for, your taxes are gonna pay for it, they're gonna go up. If there's money not utilized under the 97 million, well, the taxpayers aren't paying for it directly through a debt exclusion. So if that's a cost, a project that the town wishes to pursue, but you don't want it, and you want to do it within the levy limit, so as not to be, spending direct tax dollars for this project, now you're doing asking the town for a bond authorization, and, it could be 10, 15, 20 years, whatever it is people feel is best. And obviously those are numbers everybody could evaluate, but the debt service on that would have to be fit within the operating budget of the town, as opposed to the debt excluded project.
The other point is, it's not 100% aesthetic, because the underground wires are less
That is
problematic in winter weather.
If it's done right.
Yeah,
Correct.
and there are different.
If
schools
it's
of
not
thought.
connected to, if it's not, I found this out last winter, if it's not connected to anything above ground.
Correct.
Because if you are then connected to things above ground, my neighborhood is, you also lose power and cable,
So
which we did
if
for like 4 days, which was annoying.
everywhere were underground,
Right.
in theory, the entire grid would be more stable than it currently is with everything over, or most things
Well,
over.
you have water flooding.
True, but
But, I'm sorry.
I would have to agree with Mike that I think that, by doing it the other way, it comes across like, it makes it look like, and people complain about this all the time, that it's being snuck under. Oh, you were appropriated X amount of dollars, and you came in under budget, and then you went and spent it on something else. So I feel like if we're just up front and say this is what, and sometimes it's, what's that expression? Don't ask and.
Don't ask for permission, ask for forgiveness.
Right.
Probably
I don't
wanna
think
do
that's
that
a
one.
great idea. I don't
I
think
don't
that's
wanna
a-
do that one.
No, I don't think it's a good.
The building committee has discussed it publicly on camera. I know, again, I provided the slides of an update. The school committee is informed, and that's why ultimately, without, as we discussed in the building committee, that nobody's gonna be comfortable doing that unless there's specific support from the board of selectmen and the school committee. Again, they're the elected executive boards of the town, and it's not a decision that the building committee should be making.
And I guess that's kind of where my question really at the core lies is either the Board of and I was more towards the Board of Selectmen, because they have more of a meeting that would be, they'd be able to do that, and that is the Board of Selectmen planning to have something on their agenda that says, we want your input as to what direction you might want us to go in. Just, as a discussion, and say, because ultimately, right, we've elected these officials to make these decisions for us, and there's also,
This is an unconventional one.
this is very unconventional, and I don't, it has been very open. Like I said, you discussed it in that Board of Selectmen meeting. I watched it. I listened to everything that you said. I agree, and I understood everything you said, and I really don't feel there's been any type of anything hidden about it. I just was hoping that either the Board of Selectmen, the school committee, or the school building committee had a thought of maybe having a meeting where the citizens can come in and say, we do think we should do it this way, or no, we don't, we should maybe hold off on it. And that's really all my question is, or is there something in, like, an idea that has kind of been thrown around that, like, maybe we just have a meeting where we discuss that, and it's on one of their meeting agendas. I guess that's really where my.
Yeah. And obviously those specific questions haven't been put in the form of, at this time, seeking specific support. So I guess that would be a question, a recommendation for when that comes up. And what the forum is, whether it's, again, selectmen and the school committee, each having their own, forms of vote, or if it's a joint meeting of both boards, and some sort of, I know you're looking for some sort of public hearing process, yeah. That hasn't been, we haven't got to that point yet, but it's it's a good point.
I don't want to belabor this, but coming, kind of being new a little bit, is there a way really at a very high level to help me understand the impact of the project coming in the mid-90s versus 97? Like, what is that favorability? What happens?
What's the tax impact?
Yeah, exactly. That number one, and then number two, what's the impact of being $500,000 less favorable? I'm just kind of, what does it really mean? What is this going to mean to us?
We can do that calculation based upon what was initially provided to the community.
Okay.
In terms of, and that's obviously a good question. If it's essentially 40 cents, per thousand on your, taxes, it may be a non-factor. It might change the, it might be, why not?
And if we have, well, yeah.
It's a very, very, very good point.
And if we have the public, the public discussion about this will certainly help,
Sure.
crystallize it or whatever.
Yes, fair enough. We can calculate that.
I also think if the public is involved, that obviously everybody knows about the high school, but they're more apt to be around and go to use the stuff over here and go, you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of people like me that don't know a lot of the things around here, and just say it's not this street if it's over that dairy farm. I've never even been to it. I keep hearing about it. You know what I mean? Like, to get people to go to it, at least to experience it and see that, like, something is really, really nice here. Not that there isn't a lot of really.
Well, and the
really nice
benefits
everywhere.
of that,
just
of
showing
that
them.
project even,
Yeah.
the increased ability at the police station, especially with everything that's gone on recently with issues in the schools and not, not
absolutely.
necessarily Abington, but everywhere.
So,
All that said,
I just want to confirm my marching orders at this stage. I'm going to get to the committee, just a copy of the first quarter expenditures, and we will calculate the impact of, let's say, $500,000 to $600,000 on the average tax bill, so that it can be put in perspective with regard to decisions to be made on the underground utilities. Is there anything else that I either volunteered to do, or as I was asked to do? We'll get to the public.
Have you gone to Gardini's?
I'm
Can
sorry?
you give us a review of the Italian sushi?
Giordano.
Giordano's?
I could, but I've only had 2 experiences there, so I'm not sure that I'm the best person to do it.
Well, then I guess I'm good right now.
Okay. But if the town is willing to let me expense it, I'm happy to do a more thorough review.
As long as it's a business meeting, I guess.
with that said, we move to the old business portion of the agenda. Are there any liaison reports?
Not to be hasty, but would the finance committee excuse me gracefully?
Yes.
Thank you. And not that
Thank
there's
you.
a ball game or anything, but thank you. It's serious.
Hey, Rick. I went to the school committee thing. Yeah. I mean, there seems to be some pretty good people on there that have their head at least around asking questions of why this particular thing came up. I asked, how does somebody miscalculate 50 and 600, and why don't we put it on them? Another question I asked was, they gotta fix some frosties where the bus circle is, and I said, again, I don't understand, like, why don't you put it on them? When people make mistakes, they have to fix them. Why are we not, why don't we have, I have to watch what I say, but, like, why does nobody have,
Accountability.
Thanks, I have such bad language.
That's all right.
So, why is that? And they said, well, we brought in 2 outside independent engineers, and they couldn't tell us that it was their fault. And I specifically asked, just one question, I go, was the road there before? And they said, no. I'm like, who else would have done it? I'm like, I don't even know. We really brought people in and paid them money to tell us that it wasn't the person's fault that put in the road. You know, so they said, you know, they did everything the right way and to spec, and so the only thing I would say is on that school building committee, to try to see if there's somebody who can be somewhat of a pit bull. Because it does sound like there are instances.
Sounds like there is now.
I don't, but I don't know, maybe, yes. It does sound like, you know, the people in there, and again, they're very nice, it's just, I think a lot of time people are afraid of confrontation. I tend to like it. So, you know, I don't mind asking questions like that or saying to somebody that to fix it. You know, we just gave you $1 million, figure it out. So, you know, things like that, I don't know. But if I can do something like that where somebody could
Well, they'd
give
like
me
to
the
get
ability
those-
to do it, I would do it in a second.
They like to get those questions too. I know Mr. Schaefer is usually saying, because if you're thinking it,
Yeah, yeah.
then there's
And Peter
there's,
Schaefer did.
definitely people in the community that are
Yeah,
thinking
yeah,
it.
Schaefer
So if
was
they
one of them
can
that was pushing it.
answer those
Yep.
questions from you, you can answer it for a lot of other people.
And he was one of the Schaefer was one of the people pushing it, meaning like saying like he's the one that said, look, we called in somebody and said, well, we don't know if that's actually right. Bring in another person because it doesn't make sense. And again, it's my point of who cares, right? If somebody gives me $1 million, one of my things kind of isn't 100% perfect. I can't really go back to him and say, it kind of happens, right? I got to deal with it. It's in the revenue or the profit of what I dealt with, and if it's in there and it doesn't take away too much, then you just go and you deal with it. I just don't know if we have somebody literally saying, no, you deal with it, hang up the phone. And you know, it does seem like that's needed. Again, I don't know, maybe there is somebody that does. I don't know who talks to these people. I think the guy maybe Bradford, which he seems like a very educated, nice guy. But I think somebody's just need. I'm glad I'm on it to help a little bit. I don't know if there's going to be any other things that pop up like that, but there are plenty of instances. I think we've seen a couple of them with the forklift and not being a forklift and a scissor lift. I still have no idea whether it's a scissor lift. Nobody's really still been able to explain to me the actual need of spending $16,000, right? So
In the Bobcat.
yes, and then for the park, a stripper. You guys call it a striper.
That was a different budget though.
Correct.
That was a,
Yeah, so there's
Capital
three things in there worth a lot of money. And Rick just got done telling us that we have to pay for recycling for $280,000 when those three things might add up to 50, if not more. So I just think if people could see that this one specific decision, your question of drilling it down to the smallest portion is a great way to explain it to people, because you can get a lot more buy-in that way. But on the back end of it, when you add up these large expenses, they equal a police officer.
Absolutely.
They equal whatever, this trash thing that nobody was expecting. And I think that's where you need you know, and I understand this must be very difficult to budget this. I can't imagine doing it. So, I don't know. I just think everybody on there seems to be very qualified to do their job and to ask questions. I just don't think there's somebody on there, whoever this building person is, whoever they're hiring to do this 500,000. Like, if somebody would give it to me, I would literally, I don't know how to procure cement or blacktop, whatever it is, but I know I could do it for $430. I just wouldn't stop until somebody did it. Maybe somebody comes in from Rhode Island to do it. I don't know. I would figure it out in some way. So hopefully that somewhat helps a little bit. I don't know if I can make the 6 o'clock meetings time too many times, but I'm going to try. I was a little late for the first one, 6:05. So, but Peter is on it. I was surprised to see Peter. I thought that was like a function of the finance committee.
It is.
yes, he's on as
Yeah.
He's on it
billion.
now as a resident.
Yeah. So, but it was great to see Pete. And some of the other people, it was great to meet them. We're also doing, sorry, this is the last thing. They want to build, I believe it's $22,000 they asked for, which I thought was a good idea. Inside, it might be 22 to 26, asked that, I don't have the exact number. It was under 30, to build inside the school, basically for a printing press. I don't know how to explain this any other way. They want to make t-shirts with Abington on them, right?
Like a silk screen.
Yeah, thanks. Yep, exactly. So what I said was, instead of doing that, because the machine's 19, 20 grand, whatever, and now you have a machine that you gotta depreciate, again, it's more work for him and his accountants to try to figure that stuff out. I said, why don't you go to the people, tell them we're gonna, whoever we buy shirts from now, I know people that own those businesses, and there's definitely money to be made in those businesses, but I don't know if we're specifically in that business, or if we wanna be. With high schoolers, maybe we do. What their theory was is teaching them how to run a business, right? So they were doing, and I said, look, it's awesome. You just don't absolutely need the printing press. And then I gave them the name of the company that does my college and every other, Notre Dame. I didn't even go to a good college. So Notre Dame, all the big colleges, their bookstore. And I said, these people can actually give us all the stuff that we need, mugs, t-shirts, all the stuff with Abington on it. Just call them, talk to them. And they will help you set up your actual bookstore. Whereas you might be able to have 100 items in the bookstore, but online it could be 1,000. And so that was an idea they hadn't thought of yet. I hope that that's legitimately the way they go instead of going out and buying this printing thing. Because one, you're gonna have to have upkeep on it. And I believe we'll actually I assume it would make money if we sell them for the right number. But then again, how much money is it really gonna make? Right, so I still think that you can have that store in there without the printing press, first off, and make a good amount of money, because now you have no expenses. You don't have to buy a machine, you don't have to buy ink, you don't have to reservice it, you don't have to do anything, you just, these people from this college bookstore thing just keep doing it. And obviously it works because every major college in the country does it, every larger high school does it, all those, it's called FOLET or something like that, FOLET. If you ever went to a college, they're the ones that did your bookstore pretty much. So I hope that's the way they go, but it sounds like a cool experience to give to high school kids that want to intern or do, I don't know, I think they said for some credits to come in here and learn how to run a business. So that I thought was a good spend of some money. I didn't agree with specifically buying this the silk screening thing. If that's the way that they think that they can go, then I get it. But again, out of a bookstore, it's only one thing you can sell, so why, then I would beg the question, why not buy a mug making machine and, a pen making machine and all the, you know what I mean? Because if you really want to be the manufacturer, which you can make a lot of money doing it, again, I just don't see it happening here. So I thought that was pretty cool. Hopefully that continues to go in that way, and, we just buy stuff and mark it up to the residents. And I believe there's enough residents that love to be in this city and love the logo and want to help. I think that this could help the football team, the academics. They could do so many things with this little bookstore, and I believe people buy the bumper stickers and all that stuff. So,
Any
yeah.
other liaison reports?
Oh, and it was we got rated good. Again, I'm not good at all the
Yeah,
details.
the blue
but
ribbon.
There you
Ribbon
go.
award.
Yeah, like a horse.
I think it was 3 in the state.
Yeah, like a third place horse, Abington.
Blue ribbon is actually first.
Is it? I'm sorry. Yeah, so that's how much I know about horses. But yeah, that was cool to at least, I said congratulations to Peter about that, because obviously that's his sort of realm.
No, that was excellent achievement for the school system.
Yeah.
So,
And I don't know, do you guys know that the school system really wasn't good 5 years ago?
No, I just moved here.
Yeah, so the school, I didn't know it either because I didn't look it up, but on the rating scale thing, whatever you look at when you type in Abington, Mass High School or whatever school, it would show you. And again, I don't know, different places rate them differently, but it really wasn't above a 5 many places for the high school. And this, I don't know what the rating is of it, but they said it was great, so I assume an 8 or 9 or something like that. The surrounding towns like Hingham or maybe not Rockland, but all the better towns, or you could say better towns in the area, they all have good ratings, so I was very excited to see that rating.
the school has definitely been
It's awesome.
increasing its reputation by a lot in
Yep.
recent years.
That's it.
Other liaisons?
I could just pass on that Deb from the library said that she's more than willing to give us a tour if we so desired when the time comes.
Same with the fire department.
The lady that runs the library might be one of the nicest people in the town.
It's quite possible.
The fact that she has to deal with all the kids.
Moving on, correspondence. We have the Beacon, and I know that Joe wanted it this one.
I got the last one. I got the last one.
Russ.
Russ really
Russ.
wanted this one.
Thank you.
Well, you
was-
guys
it was
were
a-
fighting over it.
It was a page turner. It was a
I
page
remember
turner.
who ended up
Yeah.
winning this one, so.
I think it's still in my car.
We have minutes to review, our minutes from last meeting, very expertly prepared by our secretary, Deb. I read them over personally, I didn't see anything out of whack. We have our liaisons attached on there.
Did anybody go to the tree flag thing?
I was not able to.
That was at that farm, that area.
Oh, the Gordon
Flagpole
Bates
dedication.
and, oh, the,
Griffin Farm, yeah.
Kurt Reed, is it, they did something also?
I think that's when Mike asked about the cost of flagpoles.
It's the tree,
Tree,
and flagpole dedication.
Was just curiosity. I've heard flagpoles can.
50,
Any,
could be 50, could be 600, anywhere in there.
Are there any motions?
yeah, motion to adjourn?
Motion to approve minutes?
Oh, the minutes, I'm sorry. We haven't approved the minutes yet?
Working on that.
Oh, okay.
I have a
Motion to approve the minutes.
Is there a second? I have a second from Joe. Thank you. Any discussion? Without any discussion, all those in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
Those opposed? Those abstaining? The ayes have it. Any other discussion or motions for, quickly, our next meeting? It was in the last message that I sent you all. It will be November 28th, the week after Thanksgiving. I didn't say after Thanksgiving. I thought the day before Thanksgiving would not be a good idea.
Thank you.
So November 28th for our next meeting. Any other discussion or motions? Barbara?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
A motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Abstaining? Greg is opposed to adjournment?
I was with it.
Or just.
Greg is clearly not going home to watch
We
the Red
are-
Sox game.
We are adjourned.
No, I bust Rick, I know it's Rick. Somebody had just called me 5 minutes ago and asked about the Red Sox game.